King.
Oh. All right. Shalom. May the words of my lips and the meditation of my mind be acceptable before you, O Yah, my rock and my redeemer. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. First and foremost, giving all honor and glory to the Holy One of Yisrael, Yehovah Zevaot. Showing due respect to the leader of D.C.B, Prince Jediel, Chief Prince Jediel Ben Yissaskar. Showing respect to the men of the council, to the women, children within the sound of my voice. I bid you all to talk of my forefather, Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Lakam.
Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Lakam.
How y'all doing today?
So,
Everybody's well?
yes, sir.
God is good.
Amen.
So, I have less than an hour to do one of the most pivotal chapters in Israelite history. I know I'm not going to get through it, but God willing, I can go back to it another time to really bring out some points concerning our state of being in this country called America. Mm-hmm. Before, make sure I remember, I wanted to make sure that I give Brother Yosia, he's a brother that from Chicago, tunes in. He texts me at least twice a week just to check on me. I know he has some losses in his family. So I asked that his family, that we pray for his family for healing, because we're doing a lot of that these days. And it's always good that we can rely on Israelites that are godly to help in these type of prayers. So I think one loss was Jelani Day, Nolia Martin Major Harris, Sha'asia Washington. I think all members of his family that he has lost. So I definitely said that I would make sure that I bring it before the congregation so that we can keep him in our prayers. Amen. And keep the family in our prayers. So what I wanted to talk about today was this thing called reflection. You know, we wake up in the morning, we look at ourselves in the mirror, we make sure there's no crust in our eyes. And you know, when you wake up and you got the sides of your mouth sometimes is white, brush your teeth. You know, before you go out your house, you want to make sure you're looking your best. But how do you really look before God? We have an individual responsibility to do our best before God, and we have our collective responsibility to do our best before God.
Yes, sir.
And oftentimes, you know, we make ourselves out to be more than what we are, especially when it comes to the nations. What I mean by that is we're impressing or trying to impress the wrong people. You know, there's been this conflict that existed with Israel since I've been born. We don't know whether we want to be righteous, God-fearing people, or whether we want to be accepted by the streets. So, in our derision, in our warped state of mind, we try to stride that fence and try to please both. And I get it, because there's nobody that I know that lives in this day and time that hasn't tried it, because you're dealing with an ideal versus an actual environment. But if we're strong enough, if we believe that God is on our side, then we can make the ideal a reality. I want to go through chapter 36. And in chapter 36, God is talking a lot about the land of Yisrael, about making sure the land is going to be fruitful again, and making sure that it's going to be tilled again, and making sure that it's going to be prosperous again, and making sure it's going to be habitable again. But there's a part in here that Yah discusses that I want us to think about. One part in the whole chapter, but I'm going to have the reader run through it. Tamshi.
We're in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 36, verse 1. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And thou, son of man, prophesy unto the mountains of Yisrael, and say, Ye mountains of Yisrael, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus saith Yahweh God, because the enemy hath said against you, Aha, even in ancient high places are ours in possession. Therefore prophesy and say, Thus saith Yahweh God, because they have made you desolate, and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the rest of the nations. And ye are taken up in the lips of talkers, and an evil report of the people. Therefore, ye mountains of Yisrael, hear the word of Yahweh God. Thus saith Yahweh God, to the mountains and to the hills, to the streams and to the valleys, to the desolate waste and to the cities that are forsaken, which shall become a prey and derision to the residue of the nations that are round about. Therefore, thus saith Yahweh God, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the nations, and against all Edom, that have appointed my land unto themselves for a possession, with the joy of all their heart, with disdain of soul, to cast it out for a prey. Therefore prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and say unto the mountains, and to the hills, and to the streams, and to the valleys, Thus saith Yahweh God, Behold, I have spoken in my jealousy, and in my fury, because ye have borne the shame of the nations.
So the shame of the nations is that we, being God's children, were supposed to be protected by God, but now they're looking at us like, well, where's your God now? At this period, our land is desolate. We were taken off to Babylon. So some of the nations that fought us for the rights of certain areas for years are now going in and trying to sneak and grab those areas. Hundreds of years before, we were taken, the northern kingdom was taken by Assyria. After that, when we were taken to Babylon, a lot of nations, such as Edom, decided that they wanted to annex some parts of our land and make their land bigger. But what they didn't know is that all of them were going to get stomped anyway. But my fury, because ye have borne the shame of the nations, meaning that it came to a point where the nations felt good with pointing the finger at us and looking at us in our downtrodden state. And let me tell you something about people. Everybody is not on your side. And yes, there are people that want to see you fail.
Teach us.
Especially being the children of God. So there's this whole thing with Dave Chappelle. We've talked about it before. But what was so funny is that, there are people that are supporting him.
Right.
There are people that are part of the LGBTQ community that are supporting him. Because at the end of the day, he didn't say anything wrong.
Right.
What he said was uncomfortable for you.
Teach us.
But it wasn't wrong. So what we have in this day and time is the fact that you may get up and have some things that you have to say and express, but you have to have the confidence. You have to have the confidence that God will have your back in the matter. I don't know if my sister Nkonzi is online. I read the article. It was beautiful. Concerning her state, concerning the vaccine. She has to stand on her truth. People are trying to condemn Kyrie.
Right.
But as people try to condemn Kyrie, there's more people that are supporting Kyrie. Kyrie said, I love everybody. My issue is not the whether or not the vaccine is right or wrong. I just don't want anybody telling me what to do with my body.
Right.
And he's not wrong for that. Because once you start down that path and that road, we know our government.
Right.
Our government is not, we are not unfamiliar when it comes to our government and when it comes to their intrusion, especially as black people. We know the level of intrusion that they commit to us on a daily basis. It's a book called Medical Apartheid. Read that book. Read about the Tuskegee experiments. Read about what they were doing to our women, experimenting on them, pregnant, non-pregnant, for the sake of medicine.
Right.
You're talking about a people who we dealt with the trauma of being bred. And you know what? The trauma of being bred wasn't a good thing because they made some of us sleep with our own family members to breed.
Crazy.
So even now, we are still bearing that shame because they are pointing at us like we were the worst people in the world, but we were made to be the worst people in the world. You may notice that history is being abandoned. They're even talking about in certain places, that's what's going on in Texas right now. They want to rewrite school curriculum so that people don't feel so bad about the things, the atrocities that they committed towards other people. So they want to say, well, the Holocaust wasn't what it was, and slavery what it wasn't what. We were servants and stuff like that. And some of y'all think that this is new. You know, when I went to high school, we spend a week on Africa. We spend like a day or two on Africa. We probably spend a week on slavery, right? I'm talking about in school up here.
Right.
Right? And I wondered why black history is not taught now. Right? I'm not talking about black history because they believe our history started with slavery. Yeah. It didn't. I didn't learn about the effects of the Haitian Revolution until I was a grown man. I didn't know that there was certain black nationalists, Pan-Africanists, not in just Jamaica, but in Trinidad. I didn't know that Brazil was the biggest place in the Western Hemisphere that had black people in it.
Right.
I didn't even know slavery started in 1555. I didn't know about Mansa Musa and that he was the richest man that ever existed on this planet. Ever. Some of these things I had to find out on my own. Why? Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why you don't know that they molested little boys in slavery, that people were raped in slavery, that people's body parts were taken and sold during slavery and even after slavery. Because they had this curriculum that the South pushed called the Lost Cause. They even have books on it where they erased all of the atrocities that they committed in history and put that slavery was a benevolent and nice institution. Why? Because they didn't want their little babies growing up knowing that their parents was monsters.
Right.
So therefore they bury history. Wilmington, North Carolina, buried. Mississippi, the Devil's Punch Bowl, buried. Tulsa, Oklahoma, buried. Doing research on what they did to our veterans that fought for this country, came back home to have nothing. The GI Bill is new. We didn't get it. So there are a lot of veterans that fought for this country that were black that died in poverty. So this country kind of actually owes us more. But when you point the finger, don't point the finger at me. Point the finger at the institution. Point the finger at the country. Don't sit there and talk about how black people get everything and we get these civil rights and all type of. We get nothing. We marched for civil rights and didn't benefit from it.
Right.
Homosexuals benefit more from our civil rights struggle than we do. Yeah. But God has to fix it. He's going to fix the finger pointing. He's going to fix all of those who look at our families and say that they're split up and, you know, the women think they're in charge and all of this stuff like that. When you heard it, our brothers in jail. When for years you refused to give black men work.
Right?
Malcolm said, we are not a bad luck accident. The conditions of black people in this country and in the West Indies are engineered. Not from our own volition, not from our lack of intelligence, not from our lack of trying. Because when we had, you violently took from us. Shot doctors and army veterans in the street dead because of jealousy and hatred. So when we are in a state of derision, in a state of pain, and the enemies come and try to attack us, God has something for them. So brothers and sisters, don't worry about it because God got our back. Don't you see it now? Don't you see it? Every time they try to touch us now they get touched sevenfold.
Yep.
Our only thing is that we got to get our act together and stop beating down on one another. But when God has enough, come on, California, those houses are some of the best houses in this country. And they're burning up. Half of this country is being flooded. And now it seems like ain't nobody gonna have their Christmas toys this year. Y'all getting hit all over the place. Talking about they still out in the boats right there. They're right there, but there's not enough people to go out and get it.
Not enough truckers.
Not enough truckers, not enough laborers. But God is going to give it to you the way he's going to give it to you. The same way he gave it to Egypt. What happened with Egypt is he affected their economy. How can you eat if locusts is eating all of your food? It's the same thing happening now. Tamshi.
Verse 7. Therefore thus saith Jehovah God, I have lifted up my hand. Surely the nations that are round about you, they shall bear their shame. But ye, O mountains of Yisrael, ye shall shoot forth your branches, and yield your fruit to my people Yisrael, for they are at hand to come. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn unto you, and ye shall be tilled and sown, and I will multiply men upon you, all the house of Yisrael, even all of it. And the city shall be inhabited, and the waste places shall be builded. And I will multiply upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and be fruitful. And I will cause you to be inhabited after your former estate, and will do better unto you than at your beginnings, and ye shall know that I am Jehovah.
Tamshi.
Yea, I will cause men to walk upon you, even my people Yisrael, and they shall possess thee, and I shall be their inheritance, and I shall no more henceforth bereave them of children. Thus saith Jehovah God, because they say unto you, thou land art a devourer of men, and hast been a bereaver of thy nations.
Because people get the land, like the Canaanites had the land, they didn't do right. They got kicked out. We were in the land. We didn't do right. We got kicked out. That don't got nothing to do with the land. That's us. That's our evil that kicked us out. Right. Tamshi.
Therefore thou shalt devour men no more, neither bereave thy nations any more, saith Jehovah God. Neither will I suffer the shame of the nations any more to be heard against thee. Neither shalt thou bear the reproach of the peoples any more. Neither shalt thou cause thy nations to stumble any more, saith Jehovah God.
Tamshi.
Moreover, the word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their way and by their doings. Their way before me was as the uncleanness of a woman in her impurity. Wherefore I poured out my fury upon them for the blood which they had shed upon the land, and because they had defiled it with their idols. And I scattered them among the nations, and they were dispersed through the countries according to their way, and according to their doings I judged them. And when they came unto the nations whither they came, they profaned my holy name. And that men said of them, These are the people of Jehovah, and are gone forth out of his land. But I had pity for my holy name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the nations whither they came. Therefore say unto the house of Israel, Thus saith Jehovah God, I do not this for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my holy name, in which ye have profaned among the nations whither ye came. And I will sanctify my great name, and which have been profaned among the nations, which ye have profaned in the midst of them, and the nations shall know that I am Yahweh, saith Yahweh God, when I shall be sanctified in you before their eyes. For I will take from you, for I will take you from among the nations, and gather you out of all the countries, and will bring you into your own land, and I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean. From all your uncleannesses, and from all your idols will I cleanse you. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes. And ye shall keep mine ordinances, and do them. Ye shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and ye shall be my people, and I will be your God.
Amen.
And I will save you from all your uncleannesses. And I will call for the corn and will increase it, and lay no famine upon you. And I will multiply the fruit of the tree and the increase of the field, that ye may receive no more the reproach of famine among the nations. Then shall you remember your evil ways, and your doings that were not good. And ye shall loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and for your abominations.
And I want you to stop right there. He read a lot. He read about the fact that God compares our uncleanness to the uncleanness of a woman on her cycle.
Whew.
And some of y'all may say, well, why would God compare that? Like, that's a bad thing. You have to think about, in our culture, right? When a woman is in that state, she's separated.
Right.
And when we were in our state of uncleanness, we separated ourselves from God.
Teach us.
And unlike the woman who eventually becomes clean if everything is okay, we decided to stay there. God talked about cleaning us up, reestablishing us as a people, not because we deserve it, but for his holy name's sake. He talks about putting us back in the land, cleansing us with the water sprinkling. And he talks about giving us a heart of flesh instead of the stony heart that we have now. Then he says, then shall ye remember your evil ways and your doings that were not good, and ye shall loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and for your abominations. That is what we're failing to do right now. You know, even in Israel, some of us take our wickedness that we did in the past like a badge of honor. We're too proud of being hateful. We're too proud of being nasty. We're proud of being whores and whoremongers, even in our nation. We make excuses for the worst things in the world. But we like to Shabbat. We like drums, or we like catching up with people.
Teach us.
You know, I got to a point, I can't convince everybody of the same thing, but I got to a point, but as I got older to understand our plight as a people, my condemnation of Muslims and Christians and even people that don't know themselves, I stopped doing that. I have to stop being a hypocrite. Because God woke me up at a certain stage and an understanding, don't mean that I have everything. So you look at the Christian who knows how to look out for people in their church, how to feed the poor and the hungry, how to do all of those stuff. They just have a warped understanding of what God is. But you look at us who say we understand what God is, but don't know how to do those basic things of brotherhood and togetherness and healing. We have a problem. You look at a Muslim who goes to a class and learns about, black man is the original man, and the amount of time, the amount of space the earth is from the sun, and all types of other stuff, and learn about Yahu and all types of stuff like that, but he's faithful and disciplined in his learning. You go to them and they spit that off, and they in FOI class learning Kung Fu and all types of stuff, and they know how to stand on the line. And they ain't rebellious about wearing the bow tie. But you tell a brother to put on a katana, he looks at you with scorn and hatred.
Teach us.
We have a problem. So when you see all of the components of what God see out, what you see out there with your people, that's your people. But God is waking us up in the way He's waking us up. Everybody ain't gonna get everything at the same time, because trust me, you're Israel and you still don't have it. We have yet to be ashamed. It ain't okay for you to be an Israelite and sell drugs. It ain't okay for you to be an Israelite and smoke crack. It ain't okay for you to do that stuff. Like you don't know what an epidemic and a dilemma is. You don't know God's punishment when you see it. That means you have a problem. So we have to get to that point where we actually are sick of the evil that we've done before God. That we loathe it. That we don't like this state of hatred and selfishness that we practice. Let me tell you what a great evil I see. No man or woman has the right. I don't know where we even get that from. But you don't have the right to treat your own brother, mistreat your own brother and sister. You don't have the right to disgrace your own brother and sister, because that shame is supposed to be your shame. Right. How are you looking down and condemning them and knocking them, and you call yourself a brother and a sister? There's a difference between humbling somebody and humiliating somebody. But because we are proud people, we feel like we have to humiliate people. You learn the aggression of the slave master and think it's going to work in your nation. It's not going to work. Take that street mentality out. You can't run the nation with the Nino Brown textbook on how to deal with people. Don't work. With the Tony Montana textbook on how to deal with people. They live in a society of aggression and violence. That's not what God had in store for us. He wrote a whole law on how to treat one another, and we still ignore it. But we in Shabbat facing the east, though. My whole thing is that consider what God actually said before you think about yourself. Tamshi.
Verse 32. Not for your sake do I do this, saith Yehovah God. Be it known unto you. Be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O house of Yisrael. Thus saith Yehovah God, in the day that I cleanse you from all your iniquities, I will cause the cities to be inhabited, and the waste places shall be builded, and the land that was desolate shall be tilled, whereas it was the desolation in the sight of all that passed by. And they shall say, this land that was desolate is become like the Garden of Eden, and the waste and desolate and ruined cities are fortified and inhabited. Then the nations that are left round about you shall know that I, Yehovah, have builded the ruined places, and planted that which was desolate. I, Yehovah, have spoken it, and I will do it. Thus saith Yehovah God, I will yet for this be inquired of by the house of Yisrael, to do it for them. I will increase them like with men, like a flock. As the flock for sacrifice, as the flock of Jerusalem in her appointed seasons, so shall the waste cities be filled with flocks of men, and they shall know that I am Yehovah.
Hallelujah. Tamshi, let's get to 37.
Chapter 37. The hand of Yehovah was upon me, and Yehovah carried me out in the spirit, and set me down in the midst of the valley, and it was full of bones. And he caused me to pass by them round about, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry.
That means that they were dead for a long time.
Right.
You know, fresh bones, you got some type of stuff on it. Sinews. Maybe a little bit of blood hanging around, whatever, sinews, whatever. But these bones have been dead for quite some time. Let's get to it.
And he said unto me, Son of man, can these bones live?
So when you get the question, right, the prophet is being real. The prophet knows that God has something in store for the people.
Right.
But he's asking them, can these bones live? And what did the prophet say?
And I answered, O Yehovah God, Thou knowest.
Smart answer. Because in your desire, you want to see the bones come back. But you don't know. These people have done so much. So you don't know what God has in store for us half of the time. Can some of us even come back? Tumshi.
Then he said unto me, prophesy over these bones, and say unto them, O ye dry bones, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus saith Yahweh God unto these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and ye shall live. And I will lay sinews upon you, and will bring up flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and ye shall live, and ye shall know that I am Yahweh. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a commotion, and the bones came together, bone to its bone. And I beheld, and lo, there was sinews upon them, and flesh came up, and skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them. Then said he unto me, prophesy unto the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to the breath, thus saith Jehovah God, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came unto them, and they lived, and stood up upon their feet in an exceeding great host. Then he said unto me, son of man, these bones are the whole house of Yisrael.
Stop right there. So the prophet was commanded to do what? Prophesy.
Right.
Meaning speak to God's people.
Absolutely.
In their dead state. And said what? The bones started coming together. Sinews started coming together. But that's only one stage.
Right.
Only one stage came as far as that physical coming together. Then he said, prophesy again. And asked for the breath of life that came from God to go back into them. Without God, we still dead.
Teach us.
So we look good. We look good. We came back. But without that breath from God, we're still in that dead state. And no, this is not talking about the Christian resurrection. This is a symbolic, metaphoric interpretation of the state of God's people, especially in this day and time. Because even back then, we were in slavery, but we knew who we were.
Teach us.
Those bones weren't that dry, but these bones are dry. I want you to get a clear picture. These ain't talking about no Jews. Jews have enough. This is talking about the sister that killed her own children. This is talking about the crack mother that is selling her kids' diapers. This is talking about the brother who's shooting his own brother over $5. This is talking about us. And I want you to get that picture. Because we are in the worst state that we've ever been in.
That's right.
Even in crisis, we don't know how to not deal with each other in righteousness. This is a small synopsis that I can give now because of the time. As I said before, I wish I could get more into it because there's a lot of things that are happening now that makes this prophecy more clear in the eyes of everybody, so that we can understand that not only are we still in a dead state, we have a lot of work to do to resurrect ourselves out of this state. Okay. But Tumshi.
Behold, they say our bones are dried up, and our hope is lost, and we are clean cut off. Verse 12. Therefore prophesy and say unto them, thus saith Jehovah God, behold, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves.
The graves is the dead states of mind that we're in now. Compare the grave to the jail cell.
Right.
Compare the grave to the projects.
Right.
Compare the grave to our mentalities that we have now, where we don't know how to love and respect one another. That's our graves, because those are the things that keep us in a dead state.
Right.
You got to get out of that. Tamshi.
O my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. And ye shall know that I am your home when I have opened your graves and caused you to come up out of your graves, O my people. And I will put my spirit in you, and ye shall live. And I will place you in your own land. Ye shall know that I, Yahweh, have spoken and performed it, saith Yahweh. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, And thou, son of man, take thee one stick, and write upon it for Jehudah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick, and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for the whole house of Israel, his companions. And join them for thee one to another into one stick, that they become one in thy hand.
So I want you to get this picture, right? Symbolically again. We're different people. I get it. God made us different for a reason. If we were the same, we would kill one another. We got to be different. We got to compliment. I got to know that you got a skill that I don't have.
Right.
You know, I've been dealing with rivalries for a long time. I clearly understand I have to do something because it's something people try to invite challenge to me. And I know that because you think that somebody's smart, you want to challenge their intelligence.
Right.
You think somebody's strong, you want to challenge their strength. I get that, right? I got it in relationships. I got it with people that were in my own family. I get it, right? But no, a lot of that mentality is what you've been taught. You've been taught that you can't cooperate with your own kind. You've been taught that everything is a competition and that I have to have my stake and that you can't have any. And he says something, right? He said crab in the bucket mentality, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to go right into that right now.
Teach.
This is from the book Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeGrasse, PhD. Right? She says, crabs in the barrel. That's the title. There was an old saying amongst African Americans / Israelites that when someone black tries to pull themselves up in the world, like crabs in a barrel, another black person always reaches up to pull them back down. How often has that most unbearable antagonist at the job or at the school or in the committee or in the church or in the mosque been another black person? Y'all think about that in your head for a second.
Yeah.
Because I know I've had plenty of minds, even in this nation.
Teach us.
No doubt, fools and idiots come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And African Americans / Israelites certainly have no shortage of them. However, there seems to be an uncanny tendency amongst many blacks to orchestrate and plot the demise of other blacks, sometimes even friends and relatives. It is as though the achievements of family and friends, colleagues and acquaintances are seen as a threat or an affront. I don't believe that we can surmise this rather insidious form of jealousy to be an unfortunate cultural nuance and leave it just at that. I think it bears closer scrutiny. I have noticed that layered between the resentment and envy are issues of fear or panic, coupled with feelings of abandonment and shame. There is a fear of being left behind by the very people who we have embraced as equals. The promotion of the black colleague is perceived as a betrayal more than if the person who was advancing more than if the person who was advancing was white. Meaning you have a problem with your own kind going up that ladder.
Right.
When you see a white person, it's not a problem. Right.
Yep.
We have been taught and socialized to believe that black people are at the lowest level of progress and achievement, that we are lazy, untrustworthy, and criminal. So it follows reason that when someone black is promoted over another black person, the person left behind experiences a profound sense of inferiority. If I believe that black people are inferior, if someone who is black is being promoted over me, then I am lower than the lowest. If on the other hand, someone white is promoted over me, again, my socialization prepares me. I have learned to accept the white person being advanced as a normal process, be it fair or unfair. Historically, during slavery, the promotion of one black person over another usually meant that they would soon use their newly acquired position to further tyrannize. Am I saying that word right? Tyrannize those blacks occupying lesser positions. So you notice that when people get to a certain status of power, they feel like they're better than everybody else, right? This is amongst us.
Right.
And they look down on their own kind, right? Today, this is commonly referenced as the overseer mentality, where a black person in a position of power, often a manager, will act as a gatekeeper, charged with making sure those of his or her race are kept in their place. This individual also delivers the people in charge. This individual also deters the people in charge from hiring or promoting anyone else who is black thus removing any discomfort or perceived obligation on the part of the employer to hire more African Americans / Israelites. So what's being said is that this guy, and you know people like this, instead of being a person to bring the best out of you, they actually want to suppress your talents because they don't want you competing with themselves. Are we serious? There's people in leadership positions that do stuff like that. Your job is to bring the best out of everybody around you. Everybody around you. You mean you love God, but you got a foot on the neck of your own kind? Taking on the negative stereotypes as our identity, developing low expectations for ourselves, our families, and our community, assuming that we will fail in most things that we set out to achieve, losing the critical respect for ourselves, and thus diminishing others like us, perpetually trying to outrun the demon of shame by amassing material things in exchange for our dignity, right? That's the reason why we like the gold chains and the fancy clothes. Forgetting how to love ourselves and each other. These are some of the ways the vacant esteem of post-traumatic slave syndrome is manifest today. These stand out as some of the most serious, persistent, and I can't even say this word right, deleterious expressions of our culture's slave past, because we don't think that we're worthy of being better than what we are. Continue reading, and I'm going to go to another part.
Verse 18. When the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, Wilt thou not tell us what thou meanest by these? Say unto them, Thus saith Jehovah God, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel his companions, and I will put them unto him together with the stick of Yehudah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in my hand.
So I read that, and you read God's prophecy. So what are we doing being divided if God telling us right now that we're going to be one stick? There should be no need for competitive atmospheres amongst us. We will learn how to cooperate and be one. Your tribe ain't going to matter. Where you go ain't going to matter. It ain't going to matter no more. Understand that. And this is the mentality that we have. We feel that we have to shine. If we don't shine, then there's a problem. Why don't we let God's glory shine and forget everything else?
Bring that.
Right? Because if we let God's glory shine, everything will fall into play. When we put ourselves before the Creator, that's when problems happen. Because we want to be special. God said that we collectively are special people. We are special with Him. We're special keeping His law. That's what makes us a peculiar treasure. Right. Not the fact that you got a new pair of Jordans. That don't mean nothing. Right. Or you got a whip, or you got a Beamer, or you got a Bentley. So I want you to understand something. Our togetherness is some of the most important things, is an important measure for our success. But we have to be together under God.
Right.
I read that it's difficult when you have organizations because you have too many people that are walking your organization and they'll have their own agenda. And how do you fight that? If you're too hard, you're going to be a tyrant. If you're too soft, they're going to walk all over you. You got to learn how to find balance. And we find balance through Torah and God.
That's right.
It's the last thing. I'm not going to finish it out. I'm going to read this last part. As you know, I have always taught Israelite nationalism. I believe that our nationalism has to be based off of constructive and progressive, tangible goals that we have to achieve in order for us to be successful as a people. This book is called Black Labor, White Wealth. Claude Anderson, I read something from here before. I just want to always remember to give you the name and titles of these books. Hopefully that you'll be taking your time to buy it and read it yourself. But this is from page 170, and this is a conclusion from a chapter called The National Public Policy on Black People. he states, Black Americans / Israelites have always been a compassionate and caring people. They should continue to do so. But it is now time for them to put their own interests first. If they are to have any chance of changing their negative living conditions, Black America must develop strategies and programs that serve their best interests and allow them to both develop and to protect themselves within a society and protect themselves within a society that has historically committed harmful acts against them. Until black obsolescence was reached about 20 years ago, blacks had limited ability to organize because they lacked capital, leadership, and resources, and they were restrained by an economic system that still had a use for them. Now that black labor is non-essential and expendable, blacks as a groups are vulnerable and expendable. So, us organizing the trip to the gun range, if you have anything that's worth having, you have to know how to protect what you have. Right. You have to learn how to build assets. Right. You have to learn how to be one stick before God. So Mozart taught one time, he said, we have people who think about their personal agendas all the time, and I'm paraphrasing, but for us to get one building collectively, when we could afford to do it collectively, we won't even have the mind state to do something like that. We could accomplish much more together than we can do apart. Okay. Now I'm going to say this as well. Some of us don't need to be around. Some of us are those crabs in the barrel. Some of us are those hateful people that don't know how to look at others and be happy at another brother's and sister's progress. Right. We do carry and have antisocial behavior that we don't want to fix. So I'm not going to pretend that that's not real. But what I believe is that we should all pray for one another's benefit, and we should all make sure that we're dedicated to this cause and that we're dedicated to the worship and praise and glorification of this one King. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.